All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your recap from Monday, April 30th, the last day of April. And today kind of just summed up the month, and how price action has been going here. Volume for the day, really not a lot of volume. Don't worry, I'm going to go through all the price action for the day, but just wanted to look at volume. You could see SPYs, for example, very low volume, 20% less than normal volume. I have this sorted by the greatest volume of the day. EEM traded 30% less than normal volume. Some USO traded, which we actually saw some interesting activity in the USO ETF where saw a lot of weekly calls, but I'll get to that one. XOP also traded a decent amount of volume today, 30% more than normal. But again, just kind of showing this. I don't show this every video, but just kind of tells you there just doesn't seem to be a lot of conviction either way in this market. And whoever's doing a decent amount of aggressive selling or motivated buying. In this case, it's I think motivated selling, that they're basically pushing the market because it's very low volume. We do have a Fed meeting this week, Tuesday or Wednesday, but all right. So let me go through the price action. It's the pattern is the same almost every time futures are bid up. And it's funny because there's been a couple of times where I'm like, oh, well, it might be a little bit different today. It's futures are bid up a little bit, or we're higher going into the open for different reasons today, so we might actually hang in there a little bit. Nope, it seems like and I don't have the exact data on this, but I'm going to say out of the last 10 times that the S&P futures have started the day up more than 15 basis points, 0.15%, this happens. So it's this, I would say, and we talked about this in the trading room today. It's kind of again, it's all things that we've talked about, and this pattern has now been going on for a while, where we start the day a little bit higher, and then we just do a 45-degree angle basically to the right. So this is, I think, very indicative of bear market price action. And we're not in a bear market yet, so I can't really call it that. I could just say the characteristics are very much the same. I've traded through a few different bear markets. I've traded in ETFs institutionally for your biggest hedge funds through 2007 and 2009. I've traded, that was one obviously very big bear market, but I've traded a number of bear markets, and it's kind of the same. You'll have these little bids to the market where you think you're going to turn around, and they just get squashed, every time. So, the one thing that I find particularly interesting. So, let me before I talk about that, just focusing in on the S&P. And I talked about this in the weekend video too. We're making lower highs. I think you can basically. There's a few things that I always talk about. Some you could say, oh, well, maybe that's not true, or some things you could agree with me. I think this you could agree with me. We're making lower highs, so we stalled out obviously here, and also the rallies are getting shorter and shorter. Right? We had a nice swing up here, big swing down too, but decent swing up here into that resistance. Move down, and only 2 days this time where we got a bounce, and you could see we're fading again. So something is going to have to give here, and I talked about that in the weekend video, so I'm not going to rehash everything, but something has got to give here, because we can't get above this downward trend line, and we keep making these lower highs, and we're coming upon the 200-day moving average again. So it looks like in a day we're going to be testing it. If we get another day where if we come in futures are up 20 basis points, we're going to be testing the 200-day moving average. I feel I'm getting like more and more certain, because we're just seeing this pattern all the time where we start the day positive. And the only time that we haven't been doing this is when we start the day lower. Then some buyers feel a little bit more comfortable, and they come in and pick spots. But that's what's going on. And the other thing I also find interesting is I don't know why other markets are not as challenged as the U.S. markets. I think at this point you could say we're probably one of the worst markets out there globally. So take for example. Like, when is the last time the U.S. has done this? The Hang Seng opened up about 60, 70 basis points last night and closed 1.7%. I mean, these are big markets. I know a lot of U.S. retail investors don't look at this stuff, but institutional traders do. Institutional investors do. But look at how Hang Seng finished. When's the last time that we've done something like this, where we've actually started the day, had some strength, hung out, and then finished on the highs? You got to be kidding me. Here, maybe here, but even so, were not, you don't have a full green bar there. So it's really, I think this is some of the ugliest price action that we've seen in a long time. On the bright side, we still haven't completely capitulated here to the downside. Well, maybe that's not a positive, but we might need one more capitulation, I think, to kind of wash things through. And we've done this before, and I can go back and look at the S&P chart, but this is kind of just like death by 1,000 cuts. We do have some events this week. We've got the Fed meeting, two-day Fed meeting, and we also have a lot big earnings. I mean, so you could give it excuses. I mean, last week the excuse was about interest rates and the 10-year moving up to 3%. I don't buy into any of that. So why isn't the market rallying now? The bonds have rallied back. You could look at TNX for the 10-year yield. This has come in, from decently from touching that 3%. I think we're at like 2.8 or something like that at this point. But regardless, the particulars don't really matter. It's, you can't give an excuse. Oh, it's got to be this or it's got to be that. I mean, it just shows right now to me that there is a lack of risk appetite across the board. So we'll just have to kind of get through it. Right now, the best thing that you could do, I'm not going to rehash this whole thing because we talked about strategy today in the midday session. But if you're still, if your book is more tilted to the longs, this pattern is taking place almost every day. Where if we start the day up 20 or 30 basis points, I talk about it. In our pre-market session, go ahead and buy some S&P, buy some Q's puts. It seems to be working almost every. Again, I would say 9 out of 10 times, it's working. And you could have waited till we broke the value area. I mean, because clearly, once we go through, we're slicing through it. So you don't have to worry about like, oh, geez, 2 red bars and I missed it. Clearly, that's just the start. I mean, we're finishing on the lows. So anyway, that's just kind of going through. Best performing sectors today: energy and gas. The Chinese internet's again very frustrating because we've seen some call buying in the Chinese internet ETF, and it's just getting swept up with the U.S. volatility. If it wasn't for the U.S., this thing would be probably decently above its 200-day moving average, but the volatility in the U.S. is keeping these China internet names, I think anyway, in check. You just can't have Chinese internets rally when the market, when the U.S. is doing what it's doing, but still eked out a nice gain today, up 80 basis points. So still below the 200-day moving average. We'll see if it can get above, or we'll see if it gets rejected there. So the energy names were pretty good. So I'll talk about, I've been talking about this pretty much all this week, that really when everything gets sold like it is, it's very difficult to trade options, and to trade options in single names. The right environment for trading options in single names is not when the whole market is getting sold off. It's going to be very rare that if you buy a name that sees calls that, you really have something stock specific or an event going on in a sector that is going to take it higher. So again, I'm not saying it can't happen. It's just a lot harder to make an option trade work in a single name, unless there's some big stock news. So for example, we saw Twitter calls that went up earlier today. So Twitter, that's a good example of something stock specific coming out, and it bucking the trend for the day. Again, it has to be something pretty unusual, but they came out and announced a deal with Disney for content, I believe. So that drove up Twitter up 4.5%. Also oil, so we are seeing some good trades. We saw today for oil, which gave back a lot of the gains, but As long as you're taking profits, you definitely had a chance today. And the USO, sorry, and the USO ETF, you'll be able to see here just a second that there was, I think, it actually ended up being 150,000 of the weekly May 14 calls. Now these were originally purchased for like just a hair under 10 cents, or right around, I should say right around 10 cents, 11 cents. And, you know, those went up pretty decently as Netanyahu was speaking. I think that's was one of the causes of oil going up. And we did also see some energy, a couple different trades in the energy space. We saw an XOP call buyer. Those were the May 41 call, 41 and a half, kind of speculative, just like the USO. We also saw a lot of Halliburton that traded today. Repeat calls got up to 14,000 of the May 50 calls. So definitely there seems like this group has some momentum to it. A few other names, a few healthcare names. I took Abbott today. It got absolutely smoked today from the time that I bought it. I mean, what are you going to do? This was a name that I talked about a few healthcare names that I thought were looking pretty promising. I think AstraZeneca did pretty good. That was another name that I highlighted. AstraZeneca, well, it actually finished down on the day. It did catch some nice strength up until a little bit after 11 o'clock. But you could see still, I think, pretty good versus still a pretty good looking chart, even though it closed well off the highs for the day. Just a few other names. Again, I just don't want to dwell too much on option activity. Bristol Myers, I thought Bristol Myers at this point, I know a lot of people, they always want to, I know there's biotech traders out there, and as soon as the stock starts to fall, they want to buy it, which I think is absolutely, it's very amateurish. I'm sorry to single out people, but I see this a lot. Biotech traders, they want to buy it as soon as they think that they know or something. So whenever a stock in that sector starts to fall, they want to buy right away, which again I think is probably I'm really being mean tonight, but it's probably one of the stupidest things to do. No, so look at Biogen has had this big move. It's way below the 200-day moving average. It's way oversold. But notice where it's consolidating. And if you go to the weekly chart, so it's, in my opinion, and through my trading career, when a name has a big decline, you wait until until it confirms that it has that support. So notice 51.52 is the bottom of the weekly. This is the bottom actually of the yearly value area. That's your support. If it breaks there, get out. But if you want to try a counter trend trade, they were buying a little bit of Bristol Myers. So two things for confirmation and again, this is a counter trend name. It's way below the 200-day moving average, but it's pretty darn oversold. So you've got your support of the value area, that 51.52, and somebody's coming in and they're buying calls. That to me makes more sense than the first day or two that the stock is selling off. Be patient and wait for support to be confirmed that it's holding the support, even if it takes a week or two, which it's done. And I took a small trade today in Bristol Myers today, and if it breaks this, I'm out. And whenever I trade counter trend trades, when trades below the 200-day moving average, they're just that. It's a trade, and it's a smaller trade than usual for me. Sorry to pick on the biotech traders, but I see a lot of these guys on Twitter. They seem to have, and again, it's sometimes just the more knowledge that you have in a particular area is sometimes bad, sometimes hurts you, because you think that you're going to be right because you have some knowledge in this area, and that can fault you because there's always bigger traders out there than yourself. Another trade that I thought was interesting was MOCO. This is a casino name. This used to be the old MPEL. You've got the Macau numbers tomorrow. I also took a shot in this trade. So I did trade a couple things today. Maybe I was a little bit bored. This is the weekly chart, but it reports earnings on the 3rd. So you kind of have a double dip here. you've got two catalysts. You've got the Macau numbers, which could lift the stock. If that doesn't do it, if the Macau numbers are bad and the option price goes down because of that, you could actually you'd be able to recoup it if you hold it through earnings. I would only do that if the stock gets hit on that. But a couple other trades that we saw in the morning. We saw. I actually don't have all the trades in here listed, but this was a pretty good trade at the end of the day. A couple of traders took. And you can see this got a nice lift today after really getting beaten up on Friday, but was able to climb through the value area up and away. Some traders really made some nice money. We saw some calls go up in the morning, and then at the end of the day, we saw repeat weekly calls. So if you're just for a quick end of day trade, I think you would have made some money on it. So so that's it. That's today's recap. Again, you have to be patient. And just continue to trade light until we get out of this pattern, or if not, just continue to press to the downside with some index puts. I think is a smart move. The option activity is not going to tell you much in this market. There's some individual names. I mean, it wasn't a huge amount of option activity, but some people they like to, some traders on Twitter, what they like to do is after something's happened, then they'll tell you, oh, the option activity was really bad today. Or if the market rallies, they'll say, oh, the option activity was great today. It's almost the same every day. So it's just a matter if there's decent buying going on in the market or not. So today was one of those days again where it just was a decent amount of index selling going on affecting the whole market. All right, so that's it for today. Have a great night and see you tomorrow.